So this is something I've been talking about the past couple of days. It's all over my Twitter. It kind of went a little crazy and was getting shared and retweeted a lot. My Dinoking theory. I talked about it on the live stream. I talked a little bit about it on the individual segment. But this theory keeps growing and growing. And it's something that I've been wanting for a while now because I love that character. And when we got Power Core combiners and we didn't really have normal combiners back in the day, and I went to BotCon back then. I forget what year that was. Been to all of them, so they all kind of merged together at this point. But when they were, they asked Hasbro and they asked hey, you got Power Core combiners, Grimstone, like this Dinobot combiner team. And granted, the individual members didn't have individual robot modes. They were pretty much, generics. Will you ever do a Dinoking repaint? And, Hasbro was like, oh, maybe one day we will. And of course, that never really happened. Yeah, we got, the Japanese version and that kind of, oh, it's Transformers Unite. And it's like, yeah, it's Kakuryu, I guess. But now he's a good guy. And it wasn't really the same thing. And then when we got Volcanicus through Combiner Wars, it's like, hey, will we get a Dinoking repaint out of that? And no, we didn't really. We just kind of got another Dinobot repaint on the Japanese side of thing with some extra weapons to fight against, Abominus and the Japanese continuity. So now we got this one. And I just been taking this thing apart like crazy, day after day, looking at tons of images and just going, oh man, this is totally going to happen. It just makes sense. All the stars are aligning now for the first time. But then, today, Evan Brooks, one of the lead designers on the Transformer brand with Hasbro, posted on their Instagram account just a little talk about our little core class Dinobots that we have today. And, he talked about like, hey, it's really cool, that we're finally doing like core class, combiners. We haven't really done something in a small scale like that in the Legend scale in a while. They did that with Revenge of the Fallen, and then they did that with Transformers Prime. And he thinks that like, I think he's right. I think the very last Legend scale combiner we really had, if you really want to talk about it, was probably Infernicus, which was that Abominus Transformers Prime repaint retool. So I think that was really the last time we had something tiny like that. Everything's been a little larger since then, of those big combiner teams, not just like two characters combined to one, but something actually that's like 4 members or more. So, they were having that little discussion, and they was talking about how like, oh, I originally was, working on this with Shu-san. Shu-san is known as Shu Imezu, who is a recent designer at Takara Tomy. He worked on like Bumblebee movie RC. He did that recent Laserbeak toy that we have in the core class. He's a new guy. He worked on that Megatron His Tank, if people love or hate that one, So he's a new guy who's been doing some designs and stuff, and they brought in Hasui-san to also work on this combiner team. And Hasui-san, if you don't know who, Shogo Hasui is, like, he's the man. Like, he reinvented the Masterpiece line after MP10. Like, he did MP10, he did the Starscream afterwards, the Sideswipe molds, the Soundwave molds, the cassettes, the Datsun molds, the Wheeljack molds. I mean, this guy, like is an MVP just on that. But he had a lot of experience when it came to designing combiners, because he did Combiner War stuff with Bruticus, he did Victorion, he did the Devastator, for our Power Core combiners, our Supreme class, and of course he just recently did the Studio Series Devastator and the Constructicon. So he has pretty good, knowledge when it comes to designing combiners, big and or small. So he's really good with that. Depending on the price points, he could pull it off. And they were saying how, like, when we first had this talk, like, and it's kind of interesting what they said here. They're like, hey, like, we could have done like a deluxe class as the centerpiece, and then the core classes could be the limbs. And they said, while that didn't happen in the end, that is something that they could possibly revisit in the future. And so that made me scratch my chin and go, we might be getting other combiners in a smaller price point, where a deluxe is the core thing, and a deluxe fire truck, hotspot, and then you could have all the core classes be the individual members. Now, obviously, a lot of people probably would rather something a lot larger, but it is one way to put out some cheaper price point characters that are normally would be a lot more expensive to collect. And it could just be one way also to kind of keep those trademarks without having to revisit them in a bigger, expensive price point. So that's something to consider for the future, and keep that in your mind. But then they said here, we ultimately went with 6 core class bots perhaps that we could get some future purpose out of those molds. And that line right there, in my opinion, says it all. You know, outside of everything else that I've, you know, speculated and pulled up everything, you know, like, because, again, I firmly believe when you look at what they've shown us thus far, and he posted brand new images, you got it. You look, we have the Triceratops and we have the Brontosaurus making up the top of the robot. They make the top of the torso, just the torso. And when you have the Triceratops, aka Slug, aka Slag, making the top part, and you have the Brontosaurus, Sludge, making the bottom part of the torso, that's literally the makeup and design of how you start your Dino King. Or if you want to go with the Western terms, we'll call it Monstructor. But because we're talking dinosaurs here, I understand Monstructor is part of that DNA also, but this is dinosaurs, and this is where it's going to probably go more so. And yeah, we'll probably get a Monstructor repaint at some point or a crazy retool. But the way that I see this is it's starting to shape that way. And then when you look back in August 3rd, you go back to August 3rd, and there was all these leaks that we talked about on the podcast, where we had all these core class leaks for what was going to be coming in 2023. And we talked about a core class Nemesis Prime, which was going to be a repaint of the core Optimus, and a repackage of Bomb Burst and Starscream. But then there was also Grimlock, Swoop, Snarl, and Scar. And Scar is kind of that weird extra Dinobot member. There's been a few extra Dinobot members throughout the years. There's been Slash, there's been Paddles also. But Slash and Paddles at least kind of had alt modes that we knew what they were. Like if you think of Slash, it's like, okay, we know that alt mode. We think of Paddles, oh, we know that alt mode. But Scar has never been given an alt mode. He appeared in the comics. He was in that pre-Dinobot era when they were Dinobots, as in D-Y-N-O. So that Cybertron era before they get their Dino modes. And then, of course, you know, spoiler, he didn't make it. So this is a character, because he has no alt mode that's, you know, predetermined to his character, they could slot in anything they want. And that's where it's like, okay, well, you look at Dino King and you go, well, you have the other members. So, you know, Kakryu is going to be our Triceratops. You know, that's going to be our Triceratops character. That's going to be our Slug that plugs in on top there. Yeah, he's a kind of weird-looking Triceratops. His horns all are in a row, and that doesn't really exist in any real dinosaurs, at least to my knowledge. I'm no paleontologist, but not that I know of. And then, of course, after that is Ryu, which makes our Brontosaurus under that, again, which is Slug. And then we get to the limbs. You know, you look at the right arm, you know, Yokuryu. That's going to be our Swoop. It's going to be our Pterodactyl. Doryu. One of the legs, that's going to be our Snarl. That's going to be our Stegosaurus. Goryu, that's the T-Rex. That's going to be our Grimlock, you know, the other leg. And then we got that left arm, Gairyu, the Ankylosaurus. And that's where we go, maybe that's what Scar is going to be. Is he going to be that Ankylosaurus? I mean, there's been other Ankylosauruses in Transformers history. You know, Beast Wars Neo. You had Bazooka. You had that drone, like I mentioned, that was part of Grimstone and the Power Core Combiners. Wasn't really a named character. One of the Constructabots, when Hasbro was doing those weird Transformer Constructabots, Drift had a Ankylosaurus partner named Roughneck. There is a Decepticon, part of the Robots in Disguise 2015 series, named Scowl, who was an Ankylosaurus. Oddly enough, Scowl is the actual trademark of one of the Monstructor members on the western side of what is Dino King, but that Scowl member actually was the mold that ended up becoming Doryu, which is our Stegosaurus. I don't want to confuse you guys. I'll probably put images up just to make sense of everything. But yeah, so probably not going to use Scowl. And then you got from Rescue Bots, they had Scale, which was one of those Ankylosauruses that turned into a weapon for the Rescue Bot characters. There's quite a few, but Scar never had one. The trademark Scar has also been associated with a Power Master / Godmaster. They're probably not going to go that route. So I really think that we're going to get Scar, the Dinobot member, and he's going to be an Ankylosaurus, and he's going to be coincidentally, the left arm of this combiner. And at some point, we're going to get a Dino King repaint. Will there be Pretender shells? Chances are probably not. I would absolutely love it if they did. but at the same time, I don't think so. It's something that I've been diving deep into this and just getting excited. And the fact that even today with Evan Brooks talking about how they chose 6 members with the purpose of getting something out of those molds later, historically combiners are 5 or less. The 6 combiners are kind of a rarity. It's kind of those Constructicon kind of situations or, and other rarities, but it really is something where you don't really see 6 combiners that much, Landcross, stuff like that. So it's mostly a 5 combiner thing. And for them to force in 6, even when something like Volcanicus historically has been a 5 combiner member, and them going like, well, you deluxe class in the center and then a whole bunch of cores. I mean, they were probably playing with that idea initially because they were probably going, okay, we're going to make a deluxe class Grimlock and we're going to do the other 4 members as core classes. And then they went, no, but, and Hasui probably with his, Japanese history and growing up with Transformers on that side of the globe with Transformers Victory, and Shusan also, they were probably going like, nah, man, you do 6 and you could do Dinoking later. And then, of course, you could even do Monstructor for the Western market. So there's clearly something baked in there, and we got to get all excited about it because there's going to be a lot of crazy stuff going on. But I'm telling you guys, we're getting Dinoking. It's finally happening. It didn't happen with the original Combiner Wars Volcanicus. It didn't happen with Combiner Wars. Heck, it didn't happen with all the other weird Dino combiners that we had through the years, going all the way back to Energon, which those ones wouldn't really count, the Swoop Grimlock combiner. But we're definitely going to be getting something. So stay tuned for that. This is going to be hype. We're going to probably learn way more about it. Look, in the next couple of days or so is also going to be New York Comic Con, where there's going to probably be some more reveals from there. So we're going to cover that. Stay tuned to the Transformer Slag podcast, and we'll keep you informed.